Welcome to Suri Cheating Story, where we share true stories of betrayal in love. Our channel brings heartfelt, real-life experiences from those who have endured the pain of infidelity. Whether you're facing challenges in your own relationship or seeking to better understand the complexities of love and trust, Suri Cheating Story is the place for you. Subscribe now to explore the emotional depths in the path to healing with us. I had to distract myself and push away these intrusive thoughts. It seemed impossible that the things I was suspecting could actually be true, but deep down, I felt this cold knot in my stomach. I had spent the entire ride home trying to dismiss the images of Sandy and the little girl in the picture, trying to convince myself that I was just overthinking things. But the more I tried to dismiss the thought, the more questions flooded my mind. I remembered how Rachel had always been so secretive about her past with Mr. Clarkson. She would speak of him in passing, but never with the warmth or affection she used when talking about other colleagues. And now, seeing the picture of that girl, who looked so much like my daughter, the pieces started to come together in a way I couldn't ignore. When Jim returned from the pharmacy, I acted as though everything was fine, as if nothing unusual had happened. We continued our drive home, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't shake the thoughts racing through my head. Was Sandy really mine? Or had she been someone else's all along? The next few days were agonizing. I kept trying to brush off my doubts, but they lingered, gnawing at me like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. Rachel was acting normal, or at least I thought she was. We continued our daily routines, but I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. I kept studying her, trying to see if there was anything in her face that gave away the truth, but I came up empty. I couldn't let this go, and I knew I had to confront her. One evening after we put Sandy to bed, I asked Rachel if we could talk. She seemed surprised by my tone but agreed, and we sat down in the living room. I hesitated, unsure how to approach the subject without sounding accusatory. But the truth was, I couldn't ignore what I had seen at the pharmacy and the growing suspicions that had been building up for weeks. "Rachel," I began, my voice shaky, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." She looked at me, concern flickering in her eyes. "Of course. What is it?" "Who is Mr. Clarkson?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Rachel's face faltered for a moment before she quickly recovered, but I could see the brief flash of panic in her eyes. "What do you mean? He's just my boss at the pharmacy," she replied, her voice too casual. "No, Rachel," I said, my voice tightening. "I saw a picture of a little girl in the pharmacy. She looked just like Sandy, and the pharmacist said it was Mr. Clarkson's daughter. The resemblance was uncanny." Rachel froze for a long moment. She didn't say anything. Then she took a deep breath and finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted you to find out like this." The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. Is she really mine?" Rachel stood up from the couch, her back turned to me. She was silent for a moment before she spoke again, her voice breaking. "No, James is not yours. She's Mr. Clarkson's daughter." "I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen." I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from beneath me. My knees felt weak, and I grabbed the edge of the couch for support. "Why, Rachel? Why didn't you tell me?" I could hardly believe the words coming out of my mouth. "Why did you lie to me for so long?" "I was scared," she said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know what to do. When I got pregnant, I didn't know who the father was at first. Mr. Clarkson and I, we were close, and it just happened. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't tell you the truth. I felt like I was suffocating. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, had kept this secret from me for years. Our daughter, the child I had raised, wasn't even mine. It felt like my whole world was falling apart. "Why didn't you tell me earlier, Rachel?" I asked again, my voice rising with anger. "Why wait until now?" "I was afraid," she repeated. "Afraid of losing everything. Afraid of you hating me. But I should have told you. I should have. And now look at what's happened." I stood up, shaking with anger and disbelief. "I can't believe you did this to me." "To us," I said, my voice filled with hurt. "I spent all these years raising a child that isn't even mine. I loved her like my own. And now I find out it was all a lie." Rachel started crying, her tears flowing freely. "I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for this to happen, but it was too late. I couldn't just pretend everything was fine. I couldn't pretend that the life we had built together wasn't a lie. I needed space. I needed to think. I need some time to think, I said, my voice firm. I can't deal with this right now. I need to be alone. I grabbed my coat and left the house, slamming the door behind me. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, but it was nothing compared to the coldness I felt inside. How could she do this to me? How could she keep this secret from me for so long? I walked aimlessly through the streets, not knowing where I was going. The only thing I knew for sure was that nothing would ever be the same again. Felt the same way about our intimacy that night. It was like something had shifted between us, a distance that had grown insurmountable, and I could feel the coldness between us even as I tried to close the gap. The warmth I had once felt in her arms was gone, replaced by an emptiness that seemed to stretch between us. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything in my life had been a lie. I kept thinking about Sandy's resemblance to that little girl in the picture, about the way Rachel had insisted on keeping this secret from me for so long. I was trying to understand it all, but the more I thought about it, the more hopeless the situation seemed. That evening, Rachel seemed to sense something was off. She kept asking me what was wrong, why I was so distant. But I couldn't bring myself to confront her yet. I needed more answers, more proof. And I couldn't face the truth until I had undeniable proof that I was right. I continued to reflect on the recent discoveries. The more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me that I had been so blind for so long. Rachel had always been so defensive about her job, and her constant need for privacy now seemed suspicious. She had always maintained that she loved me, that she was committed to our family, but I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach any longer. Had I been too trusting, too naive? The next day I went back to the pharmacy. This time I didn't hesitate. I had to confront the truth head on. I needed to know what was really going on, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in my way. I arrived early before Rachel's shift began and asked the receptionist again where Mr. Clarkson was. She gave me the same answer as before, that he wasn't in, but she mentioned that his assistant was available if I needed help. I declined and decided to wait around, pretending to browse through some of the over-the-counter medicine. After a while, I saw Mr. Clarkson walk in. He was a middle-aged man, well-dressed, and he walked with a certain confidence. He didn't see me right away, so I took the opportunity to observe him for a moment. He seemed like just another average businessman, but my gut told me something was off. The way he moved, the way he interacted with the staff, it was all so casual, almost too familiar. My heart raced as I wondered if this was the man my wife had been seeing all these years. I didn't approach him immediately. I didn't want to make a scene, but I watched him closely. As he interacted with the employees, his casual demeanor made me feel even more suspicious. He was so at ease, so comfortable in this environment, as if it were his domain. The more I watched him, the more I felt this knot tighten in my chest. Was this the man who had been secretly undermining my marriage for all these years? Finally, I decided to act. I walked over to the counter and casually asked the pharmacist if Mr. Clarkson was around. He looked at me with a hint of confusion, probably wondering why I was asking. But he told me that Mr. Clarkson would be back shortly and directed me to the aisle where the prescriptions were being filled. I was just about to leave when I overheard a conversation between Mr. Clarkson and another employee. They were talking about the new stocks they had received, about work shifts, and then, out of the blue, Mr. Clarkson asked about a personal matter regarding Sandy. That was it. The moment I knew for sure something was off. Why would he be asking about my daughter? I couldn't hold back any longer. I turned to Mr. Clarkson and asked, "Why are you asking about my daughter?" His expression faltered for a brief moment, but he quickly recovered. "Oh, it's just a small talk. Nothing to worry about," he said with a dismissive wave. But the look in his eyes told a different story. There was something there, a secret, a connection that he wasn't ready to admit. I could feel the anger rising inside me. It was everything I had feared. I wanted to confront him right there, demand answers, but I knew it wouldn't be productive. If I made a scene, I would only be putting myself and my family in a worse position. Instead, I made a decision. I would get to the bottom of this. I would gather all the evidence I needed, confront Rachel, and then confront Mr. Clarkson. It was time to stop pretending. Time to stop ignoring the truth. As I walked out of the pharmacy, I was filled with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. I had been living a lie for so long, and now the truth was staring me right in the face. I knew what I had to do, but I didn't know if I could face the consequences. That night, when I returned home, I found Rachel in the kitchen, preparing dinner as if nothing was wrong. She looked up at me, her eyes bright, and smiled. "You're home early," she said, trying to act casual. But I couldn't play along anymore. The facade had shattered, and now I had to confront her. "Rachel," I began, my voice trembling with emotion, "we need to talk." She looked at me, sensing the seriousness in my tone. "What's going on?" she asked, setting down the knife she had been using to chop vegetables. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I know about Mr. Clarkson," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Rachel's face went pale. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to play it cool, but I could see the panic in her eyes. "I saw him today," I replied, my words hanging in the air. "I know the truth." Rachel's hands trembled as she put the knife down. "You don't understand," she said, her voice pleading. "I never meant for it to happen. I never wanted you to find out like this." I looked at her, my heart breaking. I wanted to believe her, but the truth was too hard to ignore. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this," I said softly, "but I need to know everything. No more secrets. Rachel, I need the truth." Rachel was silent for a long moment, and then, with a heavy sigh, she began to speak. "I might have been able to salvage things, but now everything felt hopeless. I was trapped in this web of lies, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the man, Carl I assumed, enter the pharmacy. There was no mistaking him now. I'd spent years believing that Sandy was my daughter, but the truth was staring me in the face. Sandy wasn't mine, and Rachel had been hiding this from me for all these years. I watched as Carl disappeared inside the pharmacy, and I couldn't bring myself to move. It felt like time had stopped. I had no idea what to do next. I knew I needed answers, but I wasn't sure I was ready to confront Rachel yet. I sat there, the weight of everything bearing down on me. The anger I felt for her, the betrayal, was overwhelming, but at the same time, I felt empty. How could she do this to me? How could she betray me like this? As the minutes ticked by, I decided I couldn't stay passive anymore. I had to know the truth, and I had to confront her. I waited for Carl to leave, hoping to get a clear look at him again. About an hour later, he came back out of the pharmacy, walking with a sense of purpose. He wasn't in a hurry, but there was something about his demeanor that told me he knew what he was doing was wrong. He walked toward the SUV, and I watched as he drove off without a care in the world. I wasn't sure what to do next. It was already clear to me that my wife had been living this double life. The pieces were all coming together in my mind, but I didn't feel like confronting her then. I needed to process it all, to figure out how I wanted to approach this situation. I waited for another hour, hoping Rachel would come out. I started to wonder if she had already known what I was up to, if she had sensed that something was wrong. When she finally emerged from the pharmacy, she was walking to her car, looking over her shoulder as if she was making sure no one was watching. The moment I saw her, I knew I had to act. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I followed her, making sure to stay out of sight, keeping my distance. I could feel my heart racing as I trailed behind her. She drove home without any signs of guilt or suspicion. Maybe she thought she had fooled me completely, but I wasn't fooled anymore. Not now, not ever again. When Rachel got home, I waited for a few minutes before entering the house. She was in the kitchen getting a glass of water, completely unaware that I had followed her. I had rehearsed in my mind what I would say to her, but when I saw her standing there, I couldn't find the words. I was paralyzed by the weight of everything I had learned. Finally, after a long silence, I spoke. "I know," I said softly, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "I know everything, Rachel." Her eyes widened in shock, and for the first time in years, I saw fear in her gaze. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. She looked at me, then looked away, as if searching for an escape. But there was no escape anymore. "You've been seeing him, haven't you?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. "Carl, your boss, the man who's been fooling me for all these years. Sandy's father." Rachel froze, her face drained of color, and I saw her try to collect her thoughts. She took a deep breath before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. I never meant for this to happen, she said, her voice shaky. I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened and I didn't know how to stop it. I shook my head, the words stinging more than I expected. Stop? You didn't know how to stop? I laughed bitterly. You've been living a lie for years, Rachel. How long did you think you could get away with this? How long did you think I wouldn't find out? Tears welled up in her eyes and I could see her struggling to speak, to explain herself. But I didn't want to hear it anymore. I didn't care about the excuses. All I cared about was the truth that had been hidden from me for so long. I don't even know why I'm still standing here, I muttered, turning away from her. Maybe it's because I thought you were different. Maybe because I believed in our family. But I can't keep pretending anymore. You've ruined everything. Rachel reached out to me, her voice pleading, please, just let me explain. I never meant to hurt you. I love you. I've always loved you. But I couldn't listen anymore. The damage was done. The trust was shattered, and no amount of love, no amount of explanation could ever make up for the betrayal I felt. I turned to leave, but Rachel's voice stopped me. Please, don't go, she said, desperation in her voice. Please, we can fix this. We can still make it work. I stopped in my tracks, my back still turned to her. How? I asked, my voice low and raw. How can we fix this, Rachel? How can we go back to the way things were after everything you've done? She was silent for a moment, and I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on both of us. She had no answers, and neither did I. I knew deep down that we couldn't go back, that everything between us had changed forever. Goodbye, Rachel, I said, my voice breaking as I walked out the door. Relationship with my wife. I wanted him to feel the pain of knowing that his secret was no longer safe. I wasn't just going to let this slide. I parked Jim's truck a little further down the road, carefully making sure I wasn't seen. The adrenaline was pumping in my veins as I walked back toward the cottage, keeping my distance from the house, but staying close enough to hear anything through the window. This was my moment. I had to get the evidence. This was the only way I would ever be able to confront her, to finally have the power in this situation. As I reached the cottage, my heart was racing. I could hear muffled sounds of laughter and movement from inside. I slowly crept toward the side of the house and positioned myself next to the same window from the day before. The window was slightly cracked open, and the sounds coming from inside were more distinct now. There they were again, Carl and Rachel. I held my breath as I focused the camera, trying to stay as still and as quiet as possible. The man I had trusted with everything, Rachel's boss, was now entwined with my wife in a way I could never have imagined. They didn't seem to care, didn't seem to have any idea that I was there, witnessing their betrayal. The way they were laughing, the way they touched each other, it was all so personal, so intimate. It was like they were the only two people in the world. I couldn't watch any longer. The anger and pain inside me were unbearable, and I had to take a step back. I needed to leave, but not before ensuring that I had everything I needed. I quickly hid the camera and turned away, walking briskly back to the truck. I was shaking, but I felt a sense of power as I clutched the footage. This was proof of everything. No longer was I the fool left in the dark. I was in control now. I sat in the truck for a moment, trying to collect myself. My hands were clammy, my chest tight. I kept replaying what I had just seen. The love I had for Rachel, the years I had spent believing in us. It all seemed like a lie now. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the footage, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The drive home was almost surreal. The world around me seemed to move in slow motion as I drove back to the house. When I walked inside, Rachel was there, acting like everything was fine. She had no idea what I had just witnessed. She smiled at me, asking how my day had been, and I did everything I could to hide my anger. I didn't want her to see how much she had hurt me, how much her betrayal had shattered everything, but I couldn't keep up the act forever. Later that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about the confrontation that was coming. It was only a matter of time before I confronted her with the evidence. I had to be ready. I had to make her see how much she had taken from me. I couldn't just pretend anymore. I knew it would be painful, but I needed to do this for myself, for the justice I deserved. As the night wore on, I felt a deep sense of emptiness. The woman I loved had betrayed me. The man I thought was my friend had betrayed me. And my daughter, my sweet daughter, was caught in the middle of this web of lies. My heart ached for her. How was I going to explain this to her? How would I ever make her understand what had been going on behind closed doors? I went to bed that night with the weight of the world on my shoulders. I knew that tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow I would confront Rachel, and the truth would finally come to light. I just had to gather the strength to face her. But even as I lay there thinking about the future, I couldn't shake the feeling that things would never be the same again. The love I had once felt for her had been tainted by the truth. And no matter how hard I tried to hold on to it, that love was slipping away. I was ready for the confrontation. I was ready to face the truth. But I was terrified of what that truth would do to everything I had worked so hard to build. How could I move forward after this? Would Rachel and I ever find a way back from this betrayal? Or was this the end of the road for us? The next day I woke up early, the tension still thick in the air. I felt numb. As I went through the motions of getting ready for the day, I couldn't help but wonder what Rachel would say when I showed her the video. Would she deny it? Would she beg for forgiveness? Or would she admit to everything, confessing her guilt with tears in her eyes? I didn't know, but one thing was clear. It was time to end the silence. Time to stop pretending that everything was okay. I had the evidence now. It was no longer just a suspicion. This was real. This was happening. And I was going to make sure they both paid for what they had done. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the story? The tension in our house had been building for weeks, but it wasn't until that moment, when I had everything on film, that I realized how far this had gone. I had watched my wife, Rachel, for so long, trying to keep my suspicions under control, telling myself that I was imagining things. But then it all started to come together. The times she was working late and the strange shifts in her behavior. She wasn't working late. She was with him, Carl, the man she was having an affair with. At first, I had seriously considered getting a DNA test done on Sandy, my daughter, to prove that she wasn't mine. That seemed like the ultimate revenge. If I could prove that I wasn't her biological father, I could expose Rachel's betrayal in front of everyone. But then I realized the implications of that decision. Even if I could prove it, it would only give Rachel more ammunition in court. She would use it against me, and I could lose Sandy forever. I couldn't take that risk. So I opted for a different approach. I decided to pretend that I was still unaware of their affair, holding on to the video footage I had recorded as my leverage. I had caught them again, just like before. They were playing on the bed, their laughter and intimate moments together, completely oblivious to the fact that I was capturing it all. It was painful to watch, but I kept recording. This time I heard Carl tell Rachel that he was making sure she would never get her driving permit. That way she couldn't follow him later. Rachel, seemingly unaware of the depth of my suspicions, revealed something else. She said she feared that I might be suspecting their affair, and I could hear the anxiety in her voice. I knew right then that I had enough evidence to confront her, but I didn't want to act too soon. I waited, giving myself time to think about what I was going to do. I couldn't just let her go on living this lie, but I also had to protect myself and my daughter, Sandy. I knew that Rachel feared me now. The story I had told her about the man at the plant, the one who had beaten his wife after discovering her infidelity, had scared her. And now I was using that fear to my advantage. I wasn't a violent man, and I never intended to hurt her physically. But I knew that the fear of what I might do could manipulate her into making the wrong decisions. Rachel had already created the space for that fear by making her own choices, and now I had to use it to turn the tables. She was afraid, and she was waiting for the moment when I would finally snap. She was probably counting on me serving her with divorce papers, setting her free to be with Carl, but she didn't know what I had planned. On Wednesday of that week, while we were having supper, I brought up the story of the cuckold husband from work. I told Rachel how he had finally taken his revenge on the man who had been with his wife. Of course, I added that the lover was now in the hospital, and it was only fitting, I said. I fed into Rachel's fear, letting her believe that I was on the verge of doing something extreme. The more I talked, the more I saw the worry in her eyes. She was nervous, perhaps even terrified. The next day when she returned from another afternoon with Carl, I could see the unease in her. I pressed her, asking questions about her work, her boss, the people she worked with. It wasn't like me to ask about her job, but today I was fishing for something, anything that could feed my suspicions. Her unease grew as I asked her about details I had never cared to ask before. She answered hesitantly, and I could see the fear building inside her. To further stoke her anxiety, I told her that I might stop by her work one day to visit her. I could see her flinch, her face draining of color. She nodded silently, not knowing what else to say. The weekend came, and I took Rachel and Sandy out for dinner. We played the part of the happy family, but even Sandy noticed the change in her mother. My daughter no longer ran to Rachel for comfort. It was me she sought out, asking questions, hugging me, trying to find solace in a home that felt increasingly distant and cold. At the restaurant that evening, as we finished eating, Sandy went to the washroom. It was the perfect opportunity for me to confront Rachel, to lay it all out in the open. I asked her calmly if something was bothering her, if she wanted to talk about it. She seemed nervous, unsure of what to say. And then, I asked her the question that had been weighing on my mind for so long. When was the last time you made love to me? I could see the concern in her eyes, the guilt creeping in. She knew. She knew I had discovered the truth, and she was desperate not to admit it. But I pressed on. Rachel, are you cheating on me? I asked. If you are, then this marriage is over, and you'll never see Sandy again. I promise you that. The words hung in the air between us. For several long seconds, Rachel was silent. She couldn't speak. I could see the tears beginning to form in her eyes, the realization that her world was crumbling around her. And then suddenly, she grabbed her purse and ran out of the restaurant. I paid the bill, feeling numb, waiting for Sandy to return from the washroom. When we got outside to the car, I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was out. Rachel was standing there waiting for us when we returned from the restaurant. Her eyes were red, but the tears had stopped flowing. It seemed like she had run out of tears, but what she couldn't hide was the guilt, the shame that hung in the air between us. The house felt smaller somehow, the space between us growing larger with every silent moment. I had confronted her, and now I could feel the weight of the truth pressing on us both. The next Monday, I took the day off from work. I went to see my boss and explained that I had a family crisis. He was reluctant at first, but when I told him the situation was urgent, he finally agreed to give me the 2 weeks off that I needed. I had to be away to figure out what I was going to do with all of this. The lies, the betrayal, the shattered trust. It was too much for me to handle while working. That afternoon, I drove to Carl's house. My heart was racing, but I told myself that this was something I needed to do. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I couldn't allow Rachel and Carl to destroy our lives and leave me in the dark, pretending like everything was normal. I had to make sure his wife, Claudine, knew what was going on. She deserved to know. I parked in front of Carl's house and sat in the car for a long time, just thinking. What was I going to do? What was I going to say to her? The plan was still forming in my mind, but I knew I had to go through with it. There was no turning back. I saw her in the backyard near the pool, moving some chairs around. She looked taller than Rachel, with light brown hair, similar to my wife's, and she seemed to be going about her day, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit her. I gathered up the courage to get out of the car and walk toward the gate. After opening the door and stepping into the backyard, I took a deep breath. I had to do this. "Hello, Mrs. Clarkson," I said, walking up to her. "I'm Roger Weldon. My wife, Rachel, works with your husband at the pharmacy?" She stopped what she was doing and looked up at me, puzzled at first. Then after a moment, a smile appeared on her face as she shook my hand. "Of course," she said. "I've heard of Rachel. I've never met her, but my husband mentions her sometimes. I'm Claudine Clarkson." She was friendly, almost too friendly, and for a moment I realized she had no idea what was about to come. Her husband's affair with my wife was the last thing on her mind, and I had to be the one to ruin her world. I decided to get straight to the point. I didn't have time for small talk, and I wasn't there to make friends. "Mrs. Clarkson, what I have to tell you will cause you a great deal of pain, but you need to hear it. I'm afraid that your husband and my wife have been cheating on us for years," I said. The words hit her like a slap in the face. She stood there, mouth slightly open, stunned. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me. Then I saw tears start to form in the corners of her eyes. Her expression shifted from shock to devastation. She brought her hands to her mouth in disbelief. Before I could continue, she managed to find her voice. "Do you have proof?" "Yes, I have proof," I replied, pulling out my phone. "I have pictures of them together, at your cottage by the lake. And there's much more. Their affair has been going on for over 6 years. To make matters worse, I believe your husband is the biological father of my daughter. The words seemed to shatter her. She burst into tears and I had to help her inside the house. I guided her to the couch, sat her down, and waited for her to calm down. A few minutes later, she was still crying, but she seemed more composed. I took out a picture of my daughter, Sandy, from my wallet and handed it to her. "This is Sandy, my daughter," I said. "Take a look. Can you see the resemblance? She looks so much like your husband. Blonde hair, the same slim nose and high cheekbones. In fact, she looks a lot like your daughter." Later that afternoon, I drove to Claudine's house. She had hired the same lawyer I had, and we were both moving forward with divorce proceedings. She told me that Carl had been acting strangely in the past 24 hours, packing up boxes and placing them in his SUV when he thought she was out in the yard. She was now certain that Carl was planning to leave her. I could tell she was upset, but I also knew that this was the best thing that could happen for her. If Carl left her, he would lose everything: his family, his reputation, and possibly even his career. I made sure to explain this to her, stressing that if he did leave, she would automatically gain custody of their daughter. It would be a blow to him in court, and he would look terrible in front of the judge. As for Rachel, she didn't go to work that Tuesday. She claimed she had quit her job and had no intention of ever speaking to Carl again. I didn't believe her for a second. I could see it in her eyes. She was lying. I knew she was planning to leave me, and the only thing stopping her was her fear of what I might do if she took Sandy with her. Later that day, I noticed that Rachel had discreetly packed some of her things from the walk-in closet. I wasn't surprised. I had known this day would come, but I also knew that I wasn't going to let her take Sandy with her. I had to act fast to make sure she didn't leave with Carl, not even for a few days. So I continued to feed her fear. I told her that I was going to take care of Carl the following week. When she asked me what I planned to do about our marriage, I simply told her that after I dealt with her lover, I would decide what to do with her. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable. She was scared of what I might do, and I could see that she was calculating her next move, trying to figure out a way to escape. I wasn't violent by nature, and for the past 2 weeks I had been kind to her. I didn't want to hurt her, but the truth was I had no love left for her. The betrayal had destroyed everything. I wasn't angry at her anymore. I was angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. I was angry at the life we had built together, which had all been a lie. The next day, I drove Sandy to school and had a private conversation with the lady in charge of her school. I explained that Rachel was planning to run away with another man and that there was a chance she would try to kidnap our daughter. I made it clear that under no circumstances was Sandy to be released to anyone other than me. I told them that I would be dropping Sandy off every morning and picking her up myself in the afternoons. I didn't want Rachel anywhere near her, not while I was trying to figure out what to do next. After I dropped Sandy off at school, I knew Rachel would be making her move. I figured she would call Carl, and I wanted to be sure that she couldn't take Sandy with her. I drove to Claudine's house, hoping that Rachel and Carl would finally execute their plan to run away together. I wanted them both out of my life for good. When I arrived at Claudine's house, she was in tears. Carl had taken most of his clothes and left without telling her where he was going. I knew then that he had been waiting for me to leave so he could take Rachel. But I wasn't going to let that happen, not without consequences. I immediately drove to Sandy's school, and as soon as I arrived, I saw Carl's car parked in front of the school. He and Rachel had been waiting for me to leave so they could make their move. The moment they saw me, they sped off, driving away quickly. Sandy was still inside, and I took her home with me. That evening, I sat down with Sandy and explained that her mother would be gone for a while. I told her that Rachel had to go visit a sick relative and would be away for a few days. Sandy seemed confused, but I didn't want to explain the full truth to her just yet. The next day, I changed all the locks on the doors and I started to make plans for a life without Rachel. It was time for me to move on, and for Sandy's sake, I was going to make sure that Carl and Rachel didn't tear our lives apart any further. After Rachel had left, I wasted no time in taking control of my life again. I changed the locks on all the doors in the house, knowing that things had gone too far for me to let any more of her influence linger. Then I drove straight to my lawyer's office. I explained that Rachel had abandoned her family and run away with her lover. I could see the shock on his face, but he didn't say much. He just nodded and took the notes. The divorce would be messy, but it would be mine to handle from now on. Once that was settled, I drove to a real estate agent. I explained that I needed to sell the house quickly. The house was in my name only, and I knew there would be no problem with the paperwork. I wanted to move on, and that meant getting rid of everything that reminded me of the life I used to have. I had no interest in staying in that house, which was now a painful reminder of the betrayal that had unfolded. That same evening, I called Claudine. She was crying when she picked up the phone. Her voice was broken as she explained that Carl had left her a note on the bed. In that note, Carl had told her that he was leaving her because he had fallen in love with someone else. He also mentioned that he had talked to his lawyer the previous week, and the house and cottage were now in her name. He had left a small amount of money in the bank for her, but the words on that note made it clear. Carl had abandoned her. I felt sympathy for Claudine, and honestly, a sense of responsibility for what had happened to her. After all, I had been a part of this chain of events, though I hadn't planned for it to unfold the way it did. I took a deep breath, put the phone on speaker, and said, "Claudine, I know you're going through a rough time, but Sandy misses her mother. I'm about to order a large pizza and a salad. Why don't you bring Kathy and come join us? I think we could all use some company." Less than 15 minutes later, Claudine and Kathy were at my house. It felt right in a strange way having them there. I could see how much Sandy missed having her mother around, but having Kathy there did help fill that gap, even if just a little. The two girls got along incredibly well, and that gave me some comfort. As for me, I found the company of Claudine incredibly revealing and comforting. It wasn't just the relief of not being alone anymore. It was the realization that we had more in common than I'd originally thought. We had a lovely evening, just the four of us, sharing a simple meal and talking. From there, things moved quickly. Claudine and I spent more time together, and soon she sold both her cottage and her house. Within a couple of weeks, she moved in with me. It felt like the right thing to do. Our families were blending in a way that felt natural, and as we settled into our new lives, I realized I was happier than I had been in years. Within a month after the house had sold, I sat down with Claudine. I told her that we needed to move away, far away. We needed to go somewhere that Rachel and Carl wouldn't be able to find us. It was important that we started fresh, and I was determined to ensure that our past didn't follow us. And so, less than a month after Rachel had left, Claudine and I moved to Texas. The transition was smooth, and we settled into a medium-sized town. I found work as a house contractor, and before I knew it, I had a small team of 5 men working for me. The work was steady, and I was making a good income. Life for the first time in years felt stable and even joyful. It's been 5 years now since Claudine, Sandy, Kathy, and I moved to Texas. We had a baby boy last year, and now our little family feels complete. To the outside world, we're just another happy married couple with 2 daughters. No one knows the complicated history that brought us together. No one needs to know. Sandy and Kathy are both thriving, and Claudine and I have built a life together that's full of love and happiness. As for Rachel and Carl, we haven't heard from them in all these years, not a single word. And honestly, I hope we never do. They lost everything because of their affair. They each lost contact with their daughters, and I believe they've paid the price for what they did. Maybe they've come to understand that cheaters always pay the price, in the end. Looking back, I realize that life has a way of moving forward, even when it seems like everything is falling apart. We're always left with a choice, to stay stuck in the past or to move forward and rebuild. I chose to rebuild, and I'm grateful for every step of the journey. And with that, our story comes to an end. It's a journey of pain, loss, and ultimately redemption. It's a reminder that no matter how far we fall, we can always rise again, stronger and wiser. If you find this story interesting and want to see more touching, tense, but meaningful situations, don't forget to subscribe to our channel today. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Share this story with your friends, and remember to like the video so we can stay motivated to bring you more great and meaningful content. Thank you for watching and supporting us.